And thanks for showing up. It's so great to see everyone here. We're going to talk a little bit about Davar Acher today. Let's do a, hey, how are you? Hi, my name's Rob. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I identify in a lot of different roles. I'm a cantor, I'm a rabbi, I'm a chaplain, I'm an educator. I teach at a university, I teach at the synagogue, I teach in a few different places. I have a lot of different identities. I identify as cisgender, heterosexual. I'm generally raised as white. I am a relatively middle class. I'm an American citizen. I'm Jewish. I mean, I kind of look like that Ashkenazi stereotype. So when you walk down the street, people are like, oh, there's a Jew, in that Ashkenazi stereotypical kind of a way. There are a lot of different identities, and those are just a few I thought that I'd share. Because we're running a little bit behind, I can't quite get all of us to unmute and to share. So what I want to invite you to do right now, use the chat box. While you're using the chat box, give us your name, maybe a pronoun, maybe an identity that you hold. Just kind of let us know who's here with us today. As we take a look at Davar Acher. One of the challenges with Davar Acher, one of the reasons for Davar Acher, is this challenge that started to come up in education. In educational spaces where we have started to say that your lived experiences are crucial to your learning, are crucial to your understanding, that who you are and the experiences you have had in your life is what we should center your learning around. Now, in some ways, this sounds like a great idea. Oh, good, finally, privileging and seeing lived experiences. One of the challenges with that is that we can see those lived experiences and walk right past one another or miss one another. And so I want to talk a little bit about what Davar Acher is not in order to center us into what it is. Davar Acher is not a pedagogy about disagreement or debate or conflict. I see Rabbi is here. If you want a pedagogy on that, his is outstanding. Don't look at mine, go to his, because you'll learn a great way to engage in debate and disagreement. Davar Acher isn't a pedagogy about listening. It's not a pedagogy to understand how to listen more deeply, to get a person's perspective, how to listen, to agree or disagree. It's not a listening pedagogy. Instead, Davar Acher is trying to do something else. It's a pedagogy of connecting with the multiple stories of identity that are in dialogue during learning. It's a pedagogy of well-being. So it's a pedagogy that says sometimes when those multiple stories of identity are interacting, there can be either some places of discomfort, or more frequently, the attempts to connect with one another are missed entirely. And instead, we miss those connections and we attempt to see the misconnections as something they are not. And we can think we're disagreeing, we can think we're debating, we can think we're not listening, or worse, we can feel like we're dismissing who people are. So what do I mean by that? So when you start talking about something, all that you can do is describe what you got. So here's my little coffee cup here. A fifth cup of coffee would have made this a much more engaging presentation, but we'll do what we can with the three in me. And as we describe our experiences, all we can describe is what we're seeing. But every time we're describing what we're seeing, we actually are not able to describe what is not in the moment. So as I'm describing this part here and holding the cup, I can't describe the handle to you in a way you can see it because I'm covering it up. And if I, bless you, la brute, and if I turn the cup around so you can see it, I've now hidden away that other aspect of the cup. It's no longer facing towards you. And that entire time, you couldn't even see the descriptions on the bottom. This is a lot like our identities. Our identities are various aspects of what we can see and present. And frequently, whenever we're discussing one aspect of the identity, even an intersecting part of the identity, like right here where the handle hits the corner and you can see a little bit of the bottom, you're still obscuring another part of the identity. It's one of the paradoxical challenges of identities is even at intersections, there's always some that are hidden that aren't fully in front of us. So let's talk about what that could mean for us as educators to get our heads around this Davar Acher idea. So as educators, we're used to thinking of this great plan that Sharon Feynman Nemser has for us. And in this plan, she and her team typically depict in the center a triangle. And in the center triangle is the subject matter, the participant, and the educator or facilitator. And then the circle in her picture is usually the environment or the content. The environment or the content is the container for the subject matter, the people learning, and the people helping the people learning. In a pedagogy of well-being, those positions change. And this is a crucial understanding of a pedagogy of well-being. In a pedagogy of well-being, I have to, as the educator, move out from the center of the triangle to the circle. In doing that, let's get that picture a little better for you. In doing that, I become the container for the well-being. I, as the educator, as the facilitator, am helping to contain the well-being for the subject matter, for the participants, and for the context or educational environment. This is what makes it a pedagogy of well-being, as opposed to a pedagogy of learning. The varying place, the varying position of the educator. Now, if you remain as the educator entirely in the circle, so if you leave that triangle part and you spend your entire time as the circle container, you are no longer engaged in educational learning, you are engaged in psychoeducation. We sometimes call that stuff therapy. And it's why we need to notice the positioning for well-being, that educators are actually called to step outside, become the container as the circle. And then when the moment for well-being has now been achieved or passed or has been regulated, pick whichever metaphor you like, you then step back into the triangle so the learning can continue. It's why this pedagogy of well-being pops in and out of moments, but it isn't a continuous pedagogy because you'd just be in therapy, which is great, but not what we were trying to do. Let's go and look at a little more here. This brings us back to this problem story. We are familiar with this. If you've ever heard of someone say, why don't we give a trigger warning before this lesson? Why didn't the syllabus warn us that this was going to come up? I don't know that teacher, that instructor, that educator, that camp counselor has created a safe space for me. Those calls for trigger warnings and safe spaces and all, those are calls by learners for us to step into the position of facilitating well-being. They're not actually calling for us to be different educators. They're calling for us to be educators who know when a pedagogy of well-being is needed and that we can position ourselves as the container for well-being and then come back into the place of learning. That is a result of our problem story, our story where we have decided that we're going to center individual lived experiences, that your lived experiences matter, that they are important, that our learning should center around them. When we made that shift, we also made the shift in the role of the educator to helping to facilitate the well-being. One of the ways we do this, one of the ways we address the need for well-being in learning situations is to enact Davar Acher. So Davar Acher allows us to see the multiple stories that are playing out. They allow us to step into a position of well-being to say, oh, I'm not sure that you are acting out. I'm not sure that you are unaware of how you are in a room. I'm not sure you're being a contrarian. I wonder if multiple identities are engaged in seeing something different about what we're talking about. Let's see if we can catch them and recognize the identities. Right on. It's as if knowing the other instead of othering them. That's beautifully put, Rabbi Jen. Beautiful. Right. We need to know who's there. That's a well-being practice. And that facilitates the learning to be able to happen. Until we've tended to the needs for the well-being, the learning can't happen. Great news, Davar Acher, to recognize the multiple stories, is made up of discrete skills. We can learn it. It's what makes it a pedagogy of well-being. It's something we can actually learn and teach and instruct. So I've conceptualized this pedagogy of well-being as having 7 discrete steps, 7 discrete parts: identifying, noticing, pausing, renaming the Davar, naming Acher, choosing, and parking. The identifying is naming what we're doing in the first place, either as the learner or the educator. Noticing is noticing when our conversations seem to be going davar afar or even off topic. Pausing when we start to notice these different components, slowing the conversation down. Then renaming what was the davar, what was the topic, what were we to be doing? And then naming the acher, creating a space to see the alternate connection to the topic that someone who looked like they were off topic was actually trying to do. Then choosing, are we going to go with our original topic or the acher? And then whichever we're choosing not to do, to place in a parking lot, to be able to return back to, either for reflection to see how many times are we putting in parking lot an identity that is not a majorative or dominant identity, and to be able to at least recognize that, if not change the way that we're teaching. To do this, we created a few different tools. We've got a little quick guide for you. There's cards to use, card prompts. There's some of those examples there. And then a way to track it using a cloth or a context characteristic card. I'm going to go ahead and just put that in the chat box so you can see one now. We're going to take a very brief moment and look at an example that happened this Sunday. Though I have done this with adult learners at a professional conference and done it in the university and with our adult educations, this past Sunday in the high school class with the Midrashah students, we had a great example. Now, if we were allowed to film, we would show you a film clip, but we have an agreement that they can't film each other or me, and I won't film them. And with that agreement, there's no film to look at. Instead, we'll take a look at an example. Before we do, though, I'm going to take a very brief moment. Are there any questions that you need answered before you get a sense of what it looks like? I'll give you the example, but I want to check in right now. If you have one, put it in the chat box. Let's see what we need to get out of the way to be able to see the example. And while you're thinking about that, anything you need to know before the example, I'm going to move us a little forward. I'm going to give you the context while you're thinking about that. If you have that question first, stick it in the chat box. Great. Is well-being a shortened understanding or a long-term? I'm going to, Rabbi, answer you in the most rabbinic way possible. Yes. Fantastic, right? Well-being is transitive and it's long-term. You can string many small things together. You can look at it as at a big level. In many ways, it's like an onion like that. And every time that we look at it, right, we need to keep tending to the well-being. So you can call it in many ways. If we were back in the research class I'm teaching after this symposium is done, we'd call that a jingle jangle fallacy. If you're into that stuff, send me an email. We'll talk more about it. It's great. So a little bit of the context we have going on for our example. So it was Sunday school. It was great. It was high school midrashah. It's a supplemental school. It takes place on Sundays around noon. It was in person. 8 teens were there. 3 who will say I identify as a gal, 4 who say I identify as a guy, 1 person who says I identify as non-binary. 1 goes to the Jewish high school up the street, 6 go to different public high schools, and 1's homeschooled. When they came along, we were going to watch the Simpsons episode. There are many of them. We were going to watch one and have a good Jewish values conversation, a great thing to do. It's why the kid who's homeschooled comes. They're not allowed to watch TV at home, but when the rabbi shows it at the shul, they can go and watch some TV. We always start, though, with the 15 minutes of Chavruta. We do a little Parshat HaShavua. So we threw out a little text for them. I'm giving you a sample on Sefaria in case you need it. You probably don't. Where we were looking, coming or going, God, Moses, and Pharaoh, and Parshat Bo. They sit in Chavrutot at the tables. There's a Chumash. No one uses it. They all use their phones. They have the Partners in Pedagogy Chavruta deck to help. They have the Davar deck, the cards that we could use for Davar Acher, and the cloth, the little piece of paper, and other paper and assorted colored pencils. And so now I'm going to tell you about Jacob and Tal. So as we enter this story, I want you to think about and look for all of the steps, those 7 steps. I'm going to put it in the chat box right here so that you can add to that our 7 steps. And as you see the 7 steps come up, go ahead and type them into your chat box. So coming right here is just a little slide of those 7 steps that'll let you track them as we're going. You can open that up and then you'll have all the names in case you say, ooh, that was coming a little too fast for me to see the names. Go ahead and open that up. As you see them in the presentation come along, put them in the chat box. What did you see? What was happening there? All right, so we have Tal and Jacob. They're learning together, and Jacob says, so it says, but God stiffened Pharaoh's heart and he would not let the Israelites go. That's clearly a moral dilemma. You're not seeing it in the chat box. It should have just come here. Let's look back to everybody. Wave at me if you can see it in the chat box where it says 7 steps to enacting. Great. Jill, I'm not exactly sure why that is. I'm going to ask, though, Julie to help us out here. Great. Auras before the introductions. Great. Yeah, that was the claw. I may have sent it privately to Rabbi. It doesn't say so, but I will put it there again.
I just resent it as a file.
I love it. It takes a village. That's great. I really appreciate it. So Jacob's looking at the piece and he's trying to figure out, oh, we're talking about moral dilemmas again, right? We're going to watch The Simpsons and talk about that. And he thinks he spotted one. Tal answers to that, right? So Jacob said, that's clearly a moral dilemma. God stiffened Pharaoh's heart. Tal responds, well, it says darkness falls and no one can see anyone except you can see the Israelites had light. If you really know what it's like to be in that kind of darkness, then trying to make it about morals and ethics and values is just dumb. It's about existential angst. Jacob says, oh, wait, hold on. I'm going to say we need that thing. To which Tal replied, what thing? The paper thing, the this, and he pulls out the cloth. Tal's side, you could see Tal trying not to roll their eyes. And Jacob says, oblivious to Tal, we read people could not see the one another and for 3 days and no one could move about, but all the Israelites enjoyed the light in their dwelling. And then he pulls out the card deck and starts flipping through it and says, I thought we were talking about what moral, ethical, or theological dilemmas came up in the text. Tal sighed. Pulls out the cards again and is flipping through. Hopefully you're seeing some of the steps, but it seems not everybody can. Sorry about that, Jill. I'll email it to you later. And Jacob says, reading from the card, I'm not sure I see the connection between that and what you said. Tal says, I'm saying that existential angst isn't just for Netflix shows. Jacob, yeah, like you're saying that, darkness, like the kind of darkness that can make it so you can't see anybody. But even when you can't see anybody else, it doesn't keep you from seeing that there are people not in that darkness, right? And then he says, oh wait, and finds another card and says, I mean, I'm getting that, right? Tal says, almost dumbstruck, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Jacob, yes, I knew it. And goes on to offer a little bit more because we shorten this up a little bit here. I'm going to have to skip and go a little faster just to get to the end. And Jacob says at the end of his piece, wait, we said we were going to talk about your thing, and I'm talking about values again. Tal, now engaged, says, no, it's okay. I think they're connected. What if the moral dilemma is that you can't really know what it means to be free, what it means to enjoy the light if you never knew darkness? Maybe that's the value of existential angst. The timer goes off, and just so you know, it's not some wonderful dream. Jacob jumps up and says, oh, it's popcorn time, good talk, throws the things down and goes and gets a snack. Postscript. Afterwards, Tal, who only ever comes when I show a television show to watch and otherwise doesn't show up, says, I know next week we're not watching, but are we going to do this again? And can I work with Jacob? Jacob comes up to me before he leaves, and Jacob says, you know, I think I was finally smart enough to keep up with Tal. If we had more times, we'd reflect on what did Davar Acher make possible, what didn't happen that you thought might, and the like. But sadly, in our shortened version, we don't have time for that. So I want to end both with gratitude for all that you're doing, for having come here today, and to lift up that this is an idea that made possible for Tal's identity as someone who is never understood, to not disrupt the learning, to not be met with, hey, you're off topic, Tal. Why do you keep going somewhere else? But to actually be seen. And for Jacob's identity of maybe not being smart enough to sit in a group with Tal, to also be rejected and to be seen you are smart enough without anyone acting out in different ways. So thanks for coming. I know we're out of time and no questions and anything else, but send me an email and I'd love to talk more about it. Really appreciate you.